Hey guys, back here again with my long promised, although long delayed, review of a Joshi Rest show that I promised I would do in anticipation of Manami Toyota's United States debut, which will take place this weekend when she appears on two Chikara shows. And I know I promised you guys 2 reviews. I have to apologize, there's only going to be 1. And believe it or not, a lot of the reason for that is actually due to the shows themselves. If you ever watch Joshi shows in full for an extensive period of time, you might feel some of the burnout that I'm feeling right now. Because Joshi in some ways is very much like what we would react to Dragon Gate now, for example. The first time you see it, you're just so blown away by it. But once you get used to the standard of wrestling, it follows a very repetitive formula. You know, only the very best matches stand out to you after a period of time of watching this. Because once you get used to the fact that these women are not divas and are on a whole other level than that, you notice that with the exception of the very best matches, a lot of the stuff just kind of seems the same. And that's unfortunate, because there was enough of a metropolis of Joshi Rest promotions out there during the 1990s, with the number only rising as the decade wore on, that you would think that there'd be different styles going on. There really isn't. It's pretty much the same. It pretty much just happens in rotation. A fast-paced match with some good spots and some decent action, especially with the tag matches, I have to say. You know, the tag matches that aren't amazing are usually very repetitive. So, in the end, I can only find the motivation to do 1 review. But this is actually a very appropriate show to review, because for those who don't know, this is where Manami Toyota actually wins her first 3WA World Championship, which was the most important singles belt in All Japan women historically. And she dethroned Aja Kong, who had a 2.5-year long title reign. So it was a pretty big deal when she did it. And overall, it's a great show, and there's one amazing match on here. And in actual fact, there's a match on here with Ultimate Fight Rules that's actually very highly regarded among the websites that I do observe for this sort of stuff. It's not personally my cup of tea, but it might be worth checking out just to see if you react to it the same way that a lot of people do tend to react to it. You know, I don't necessarily see the charm in it, but a lot of people do apparently. So just pointing that out there before we get into the review. But let's get into the review then, shall we? We opened up the show with Tamada versus Kumiko Maekawa. Opening things up with a singles match is not the norm for many Joshi Rest shows, but this was actually better than the average Joshi opener from this era. They normally have tag matches where the women just hit random sequences of moves, and they tag in often enough to where they don't have to do any meaningful selling, and the overall result is just not good. This was somewhat better because they have to actually sell stuff, because there's only 2 of them in there, and that gives the match some very basic storytelling, and that makes for a very standard 10-minute, 2.5-star match with absolutely no problems. So no problems there. An acceptable, fun way to open the show. So no problems. Let's move on to a match for the AJW Junior Championship. Chapparita Asari versus Kandi Okutsu. They call it the Juniors Championship, but to be honest, it's too similar to the standard Joshi style that I talked about before for this to really stand out in a meaningful way. There were some examples of different sequences, I guess, and the match was very solid, don't get me wrong, but don't look at the fact that it's a Juniors Championship and expect something different, because this was really not. Still a very solid match, good back and forth in a good amount of time, but just based on this one example, it doesn't seem like there was much logic behind having a Juniors Championship, so there is that. Still very solid, very good, 3 1/4 stars there. Moving on to the shoot kickboxing match that was represented here. Kaoru Ito versus Noriko Tsunoda. This was surprisingly very good. And I say surprisingly because if you've seen a lot of the kickboxing shoot matches from this era, they actually had a 3WA Martial Arts Championship as well. Many of the matches were just not good. And I wouldn't rate them, just like I'm not rating this one, because I haven't seen enough kickboxing to actually know the difference between a good one and a bad one, but I just kind of go with it as far as entertainment value is concerned, and a lot of the 3WA Martial Arts Championship defenses are just not good. And this was actually better than that. This was actually, this has just a greater variety of stuff going on, and it had a lot more entertainment value attached to it, you know. Obviously if these were shoot matches, from what I've read, if these were shoot matches, which from which what I've read they actually were. You can't guarantee an entertaining contest, but in this case, you know, things worked out well and I enjoyed it. So good stuff there. Not too shabby. Let's move on to the weakest match of the night, in my opinion, a tag team match: Jaguar Yokota versus and Lady Apache versus Mariko, Yoshida, and Felina. This was contested under Lucha Libre rules, and in actual fact, when the match started off, it was pretty good. They were doing lucha chain spots like the ones you might see in Mexico, and it was actually very different of a standard Joshi match, which I actually did appreciate. So I was giving it a lot of credit very early on. But then it descended into what I think is the worst trap that a lucha match can fall into. The flow of the match just completely broke down. It literally didn't feel like a wrestling match anymore. It just came off like one sequence of moves, then another sequence of moves, then another sequence of moves, with nothing flowing together. It was just like they were making things up on the spot and doing them whether they made sense or not. And it just went on and on and on. This was twice as long as it needed to be, and you know, the longer it went, the less I was enjoying it. So that's never good. You know, I'll give it credit for the parts of the match that I actually enjoyed, but really this was not a good example of wrestling as a whole, because that's not how a wrestling match would turn out. That's not how a wrestling match would turn out. This felt ridiculously amateurish to me. Moving on to another tag team match for the UWA Tag Team Championship: Etsuko, Mita, and Mima Shimoda versus Suzuka, Minami, and Tomoko, Watanabe. Now, I've mentioned already how all but the best Joshi tag matches can become very repetitive. Not that they're bad, understand that, not that they're bad. In fact, I would say that the standard Joshi tag matches reach actually 3.5 stars. It feels very repetitive and you feel like you're just appreciating the match as opposed to enjoying it, but they are good matches. As far as this one goes though, I might have gotten myself to the point where I can barely appreciate them anymore, because I thought this was very, very redundant. It really felt like the women were just kind of stuck at the basics and just staying there without going any further. There was never really a point where I was saying to myself, okay, here's where the best stuff in the match is actually happening. And you know, this was a long match too. This actually went almost 20 minutes. Didn't really enjoy myself that much with it. I don't want to delve too far into criticism because it might just be a case of burnout. This is actually a better match than that, but I just really did enjoy it that much. 3 stars. Moving on quickly and lightning fast to a singles match: Sakie Hasegawa versus Bison Kimura. This match was actually very entertaining for the time that it went, and it didn't go that long, but being that it was only short, well, it wasn't really short, it was decent amount of time. There really isn't a lot of specifics to get into, but this is, in my head, being compared to the match that came before it as far as entertainment value was concerned, and the match that came before it went longer than it needed to and didn't have enough enjoyable action. This match, I probably very much appreciated the fact that it didn't try to accomplish more than it was capable of, and it ended before it lost its luster. You know, I appreciated that. The match before that did not do that, so this match did, so I actually appreciated that. So most of the credit goes to it because, you know, on this part of the show, on this placement of the show, it actually did its own little contribution to keep me watching the show, so I actually appreciated that. I would give it credit in the form of 3.25 stars. So good stuff there, not too shabby there. Moving on ever further to the 3WA All Pacific Championship, which was the secondary championship. This was a triangle match: Toshio Yamada versus Reggie Bennett versus Takako Inoue. Basically, the way this worked was that there would only ever be 2 women in the ring at the same time. They'd have their match, there'd be a winner who would face the other woman in the triangle, and that would continue in that way until there was a woman who had 2 victories in a row, and that would be the winner. So not very complicated. And this was a very, very good match on the whole, I thought. You know, it started off with Yamada and Inoue. They had an okay little match. Moved on to Inoue and Bennett, wherein Bennett, who had she was a powerhouse kind of woman, which was being used very well in that role. So I really enjoyed their little match, and it moved on to Bennett and Yamada, who had the same kind of strengths associated with that, as far as, you know, the way Bennett was being used. So that was very good stuff there, and it came off to a grand conclusion with Yamada and Inoue again, who had a much better match than they did the first time. So very, very good stuff, I thought. Overall, the match was very enjoyable. Every woman did their job. There was no kind of confusion with the way the match was being worked, and I would say 3.75 stars for that one. Moving on to the Ultimate Fight Rules match between Yukimo Hotta versus Lioness Asuka. I don't even want to explain why I didn't like this match that much, because it might just not be my cup of tea as far as the style of the match goes. Like the shoot kickboxing stuff, I'm not going to rate this. I have seen very high praise given to this. I'm not really sure why. All I can say is watch the match, form your own opinion on it. If you end up loving it, it's only another reason to actually buy this show and watch this show. So that's all I'm going to say about it. I thought it was a good match, don't get me wrong, but I really don't see how it got the legendary status that it has attained. So I want to move on quickly and swiftly as far as that match is concerned, because it wasn't really my thing, I don't think. So, which brings us to the WWF Women's Championship match. Yes, the title was actually defended in Japan at some point in its history. I wasn't actually aware of this until I found out by watching this show. Bull Nakano defending against Kyoko Inoue. I was really looking forward to this because I'm a huge fan of both women. I think them, along with Aja Kong, are the three best examples of a great wrestler, combined with a great face or heel, and combined with a perfect package that backs up whether you're a face or a heel. They have it all going on. You know, Hokuto, Kandori, Toyota, they're the best wrestlers, but that's all they are. Nakano, Inoue, and Kong are just so much more than that. And, you know, Nakano and Inoue together in a match is a very good pairing, I think. You know, I really enjoyed the match on a whole. The way the match was worked, I think, agreed with me a lot, because a lot of it was based on them just hitting their signature moves, and I like their moveset, so that was actually a good thing if you're watching and you actually are a fan of their movesets. You know, they can't have a great match just doing that, and it wasn't a great match by any means, but I did actually enjoy it a lot just the way it was worked. You know, I don't want to express disappointment that it wasn't a great match, because I did really enjoy it a lot. You know, I'm sure these women have had other matches that were structured in a way that allowed them to be great, and I will find those matches, but just as far as enjoying these women as characters and as wrestlers, that was a good match to do that. This was a good match to do that, so I actually very much appreciated it for that. So 3 3/4 stars for that. Which brings us to the main event for the 3WA World Heavyweight Championship. Manami Toyota versus Aja Kong. And let me kind of point this out before I begin expressing all kinds of love for this match. If it were not for the fact that these women have had a better match at Big Egg Universe, I would probably give this 5 stars. But once you realize that the Big Egg Universe match was actually better, you kind of need to keep your ratings in perspective. The thing is, though, the matches are so different that it's actually artwork when you compare them, because they're just so different it would blow your mind. Big Egg Universe, the match is just a really intense back and forth battle. This match, honestly, it was at least 75% of Kong on offense, if not more, the whole time, the whole duration of the match. And you might be asking yourself, how could a match with such a disproportionate ratio of offense be considered amazing? Easy. It's because Aja Kong is a fucking queen among powerhouses, folks. Her domination of Toyota is, you know, I could probably think of a better example of heel domination if I search the history books, but this is easily among the best heel dominations I have ever seen. You know, after watching this, I gained so much respect for Aja Kong because everything she did was as close to perfect as possible. The moves looked brutal. Every time Toyota tried to mount a comeback, she was halted by just the right move, and the crowd, by God, the crowd was hushed, almost in a frightened silence throughout most of this, and the whole thing felt like a horror film, and an awesome horror film at that. You know, the remarkable thing about this is Toyota never actually gets a real comeback, and they go more so the route of Toyota taking advantage of one vulnerability that Kong exposes, and she capitalizes on that with a spectacular finish. Is it a mistake to not have more Toyota build up towards the finish? Maybe it is, and that might be the only one other thing that could prevent this match from being 5 stars, not just the Big Egg Universe match. But the thing is, by that point you're so into the match that you don't really care. You really don't care if there's one little storytelling mistake in it. You know, it's not one of the greatest stories to it I've ever seen. I absolutely loved it. You know, 4 3/4 stars for that one. Absolutely amazing stuff there. So on the whole, a very great show. I would say definitely recommended for the one great match on here, and you should definitely try and see if you're going to like really enjoy the Ultimate Fight Rules match. I really personally didn't, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to. So if you think there's 2 amazing matches on here, it's definitely worth the $9 you can pick this up on ivpvideos.com for. So that's all for me. I'm out. Later.